So once again, I'd like to thank you all for coming today. This is Kelly Cox, if you've not met her. She does benefits and lots of other things that hold our office together. And I'm so thankful to have her on our staff. So we're gonna sort of do this tag team thing, but please remember that this is very informal. If you have a question that comes up, please let us know. We are more than happy to deviate from wherever we are and get your question answered. So today basically we're going to go over several things. First and foremost, we're going to talk about the changes to the 2017 statistical reports that we do in EZRA. That's why I think a good portion of you are here is because that may change every 4 years. And so we have a few things that have changed in that regard, and we're going to go over those. We're going to talk about shares of ministry calculation, because I always get that question. How does that tie to our statistical reporting? There are people who believe that I pull those numbers out of a hat, and I'm here to assure you that that's not the case. So we're going to talk about that in depth. We're going to talk about how do you remit shares of ministry and other payments to the conference that your church may have to make. And then Kelly's going to follow up with the health insurance and benefit calculations, because that always seems to be an ongoing mystery to people as to how that comes about as well. And again, I can assure you that it is something that is pretty straightforward. It's not hard to do. And the more you understand about that, the better all of us will be, because believe it or not, we're not perfect either. And we can make mistakes. And sometimes we get the wrong information. So being that said, we're going to go ahead and get started here. In your packet that you have in front of you are several items, and the very most important item I can share with you today is this paper right here. This tells you what the finance department contacts are. Please call us. If you have a question about something, don't just try to wing it. Don't just say, well, that's never been right and I'm never going to get it. Call us, we'll walk you through it. And if you need personal help, if we need to come out and work with you or your finance team, we're always willing to do that. So please use this sheet. Keep it where you can find it. It's also on the conference website, so you can always go in and look at it as well should you misplace your sheet. You may know that we do have some new people on our staff. And those are on the left side. Not all of them are new, but Lauren Hokamp is now the executive director of the loan fund. And so she handles most of those types of questions. And then there's Teresa Hunter, also works in the loan fund, and Jane Rossborough, had you talked to her before for accounts payable. She works on loan fund now as well. Kelly's listed here. She's our benefits person, and very good at that. And then we have Ann Watson, who's accounts receivable, and Darlene Eisenhuth, who's accounts payable. So please reach out to us if you have a question. We'll always get you to the right place, or we'll find out what the answer is should we not know what's going on. Next piece of information you have in your packet will be all the slides that we're going to go through. So you have a copy of the slides and you can take notes as we go. But then there's also all sorts of other pieces and parts that we're going to talk about here. So we'll go start with the statistical reporting, which is in a system called EZRA. And we'll start by talking, why do we do this? Is it just that we're really nosy about, all the local churches? Well, as part of, Charlie says yes, but as part of a connection, we are governed by the Book of Discipline, and it actually requires us to provide this information. Every church, every year, is required to do an accounting of their church's activities for the year to the general church. So this is why we do this. We use a program called EZRA that actually is put together by the General Counsel on Finance and Administration that allows us to gather that information pretty easily, and then they work with it. We don't have to upload it and give it to them again. It's part of their system that we're actually using. So the information that we collect from each church every year provides the general church with a bigger picture of what the health of the church is. It shows where trends in population may be, where, and different types of church makeup, where resources are needed. And so that's one of the reasons that the general church uses that. You know that the conference uses that as well, not only for planning for appointments, but also when we do our shares of ministry, which are the distribution of the conference budget. We use that information, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later on, exactly which information we're using, because there's a lot of misconceptions out there about what we use and what we don't use. And so we'll go through that whole calculation. Okay. Right. As I said, the EZRA system that we use is provided by GCF&A. And it is a tool that we can use, and actually across the denomination, I believe most conferences use it to put their information in. Now that being said, I want to remind you, if you are responsible for statistics, for putting it in, sometimes because everybody's using it across the country all at one time, you may experience where there's a slowdown or maybe a glitch in the system. If that happens to you, the best thing I can tell you to do is stop what you're doing, come back maybe an hour later and try again, because sometimes it's just that everybody's been, hitting it all at the same time. So it does have glitches every once in a while. It's not a perfect system either, but if it's something that persists, please call me and we can find out if there's something in particular going on. Okay. So the statistical reporting usually changes every 4 years or so, and that's because there are changes in the Book of Discipline, different requirements, different groups needing different information. So it will change, and this is the first year of the new change. 2017 is the first year of the new quadrennium. So the reporting of the statistical information for 2017 has some slight differences. Along with that, I also changed a piece due to the daycare exemption form. How many of you have daycares or have seen that form before? Okay. Well, that form now is going to be a part of your statistics. It's not going to be submitted separately. It's going to be one more table in your statistics, and that way we'll capture it that way, and you won't have to send something in additionally later on. Okay. So the system opens January 1st of every year, and it is supposed to be completed by the 31st of the year. I do give you a little bit of leeway, particularly if you reach out and tell me that you're having issues with something or there's a reason that you can't get something done, but please try to have it completed as close to that deadline as possible. Okay, because there's a lot of stuff that I have to look at and we have to review just to make sure that things are recorded reasonably, because sometimes it's easy, like we said, it's easy to make a mistake and then all of a sudden your statistics are out of whack with something else. So we try to do a review and a mini audit, if you will, of the information that was entered. We look at it compared to last year, what you submitted. We look at it compared to other churches. Okay? So each church has a unique username and password. The username always starts with 321. That's our conference number, by the way. And then it's a 5-digit code. That 5-digit code is your local church number from the conference. Now, if you have a 4-digit code, say it's 5230, you put a 0 in front of it and make it a 5-digit code. Okay? So it will be an 8-digit code altogether, first 3 being 321, always, last 5 being your church number. By the way, that church number is the same number that you use when you send in remittances to the conference office. You say what your church number is. So it's that. If you don't know it, call us. We'll tell you what the number is. Okay? But it's a pretty useful number to know because there's a lot of things that you can find out by knowing that number then. Okay. At this point in the year, we've done something a little bit differently this year because I often get a lot of requests saying, oh, I can't remember what my password is, so I've reset you all. Your password this year when you log on will be SUSUMC. Okay, all lowercase letters. Okay, and it will be for every, like if you have a charge of 3 or 4 churches, every one of them will be lowercase SUSUMC. You will have a chance to change that, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But that's how we're starting out this year, is that everybody has the same password going in, and you all have your own unique user ID. User ID will get you to your specific church, and so you need to be aware of that. Okay. Just a reminder that by the Book of Discipline, the pastor is the one who has ultimate responsibility to seeing that this is done. Okay. They can try to delegate it, but the pastor is going to be the one who's going to answer to the bishop when it's not completed on time. So that's right, or to Charlie. Okay. The next piece of information I gave you in your book is, or in your folder is, oh, I'm sorry. Is this Statistics Modules User's Guide. And we're going to go through a couple things in here because I'm not sure that you've received this before, but it's something that I think you'll find pretty helpful. You should have this one with the blue line. If you don't have one in your packet, let me know. We have extras. So the first page on here talks about logging in. And the first time that you log in, like you said, you're going to use that username, that 8-digit username, and you're going to use the password SUSUMC. Each church has one account. So if you are sharing it, make sure that whoever else is using it knows the same information so they can get in and do their part. But the very first thing that you're going to see is you're going to see a it's going to come up and it's going to tell you what church you're accessing. So that should tell you, it should be your church. If you're not, stop and call me because we'll fix that. Okay. And then on the next page, it's going to ask you for your information. Okay. Now the reason it asks you for your information is because this is the information that's going to be held in the system, and should you forget your password, because you're going to reset your password here in a minute, it's going to be able to email you the information, okay? So again, if there's more than one of you that's accessing this information this year, make sure that everybody knows what that email address is so that you can get the information then as well, okay, should it need to be reset. So the rest of this page, they have you put in your old password, which when you first log in will be SUSUMC, and then you can make up a new password. Okay? Any questions on that? Okay, going on to page 5 of this document, the welcome panel will give you an opportunity to print the blank form, which I highly suggest that you do, because it's often easier to sit and work with a form and gather all your information and put everything in at the very end than it is to sit there and go back and forth between the actual module and gathering your data. So you'll see all the information, although in this packet you'll see there is a copy of the form already, but you could print a blank form, or you can go in and start entering statistics. There is some information here on what your progress is as well. So say you're working on entering your statistics and you have all the membership data, so you can go ahead and do that. That's on table 1. You can do that and it will reflect that table 1 is done. And then you can come back later and do the other tables. But it's always a good check to look at that and see, well, where am I in the process? Does the system think I'm done with everything? There's a side menu bar here on page, it would be page 6, I guess? Yes, page 6, I'm sorry, they're in the wrong side. That allows you to go in and do reports. Once you're done or at anywhere along the way, you can always print a report of what you've entered so far, just so that you can double check it. So that's available to you. And there are multiple reports on page 7 that you can print out. And there's also some charts there. If you're interested in looking at that, the system actually holds information, I believe, like for the past 20 years. So you can look back and see what's been entered previously. Okay. Let's see, up through 9 goes over the reports. So then we're going to talk about entering statistics. Okay. The statistical report is set up in, for those of you who have accessed it before, is set up in 3 and actually now 4 tables. Okay. Let's see. And we'll start with table 1. Table 1 is about the people in your church. Okay. And it actually starts on line 1 with your ending membership last year, as reported in last year's report. Now, if that number, for some reason, isn't right, if you go to do your statistics and say, well, we had 205 people, not 200 people, well, you can change that within the report itself then. There's an adjusting line to either add or subtract people just to adjust the previous year's number. So you can do that. That's in the report itself. But then what you're going to be doing in that first table is you're going to be answering questions about your membership. You're going to be answering, did you receive new members and how did they come in? Did you lose members and how did they go out? And what is your ending membership then? Additionally, you're going to have there information on ethnic makeup and gender makeup on table 1. Okay, and we're going to look at table 1 here in just a few minutes. If you look, if you look at the report that looks like this, this is actually the statistical report that we printed out for you. Kelly was nice enough to go down through here and actually say what the old line numbers were. Okay, so they're all listed for you. So if you knew it was on line 5 last time, you could look to see where it is now, because some of those have changed. And this basically is what your blank report is going to look like. Okay. So as you can see on the first one, there's the professing membership, and then there's the ethnicity, and then there's the gender information on here. Okay. Now, often people will actually either save or just hit enter, and usually tabbing between fields is best on here. But if you hit enter or try to save, the program thinks that you're done, or you think you're done. Well, if the totals in each one of these sections don't agree, it's going to give you a warning message. So just go back and make sure that all the totals agree. So if you have 99 members, then your total in your ethnic membership should be 99, and your total in your gender should be 99 as well. Okay, and once you hit enter or save again, the system will say, oh, okay, you're done. Okay, but I've seen that often where people are having that issue. Okay. The next section, and if you flip the page there, it talks about there's information on your classes and education, and Christian formation groups, and then mission. Okay. So these all have different requirements, or they're asking different things. When you're in the statistical module, if you hover, there'll be like a question mark over beside where you're supposed to put the information. If you hover over that question mark, it'll actually bring the directions up for you as to what they're looking for. Okay, most of these are pretty straightforward, but sometimes counting people, especially down in this VIM group, get a little bit odd. And like they don't want you to count somebody more than once in certain things. Okay. Additionally, you do have a copy of all the directions as well, and that was in your packet as well. Okay. Some of them that are straightforward say no directions available because they figure you should be able to figure that out. And if you have a question on it, please give me a call if you can't figure out what they want. All right, any questions on table 1? So I think that one's pretty straightforward with the exception of the mission stuff. That gets a little bit different at the end there. Table 2 is the expense information from your church. And this one and the last one probably take the most time to gather for you. And you should be able to use your treasurer's report at the end of the year to be able to come up with the categories that are here. So, go this way. So on table 2, it actually starts out with your asset and debt information. Okay. And that starts out lines 24 through 27. Okay. The assets should be the market value. If you have we all should have what's it called? The insurance appraisal. Thank you. I can never remember that word. We all have a value for that is what you're using, not the insured value. The insured value is what it would cost to rebuild, which could be very different than market value. So you want to use that market value there. Okay. Market value of other liquid assets is pretty easy. If it's something like an investment, it's just whatever the ending balance is at the end of the year. Yes, sir.
I just have a question about with the market value with, if you're going off of what we receive from the insurance company, it's a little dated. Do we do some automatic increases figuring for inflation?
You could. Generally, people just leave them alone, and you should be getting a new appraisal coming up. But yeah, and you don't know which way it goes. Sometimes it can increase, and sometimes, depending on the neighborhood or whatever, it can decrease. I would say just use whatever you have at this point. Okay. Or
I've normally increased it some just by a percentage of what inflation.
Okay. All right. Okay. Line 26 on here is debt secured by your church physical assets. So if you have a mortgage on your building, if you have a loan through the loan fund, you probably have a mortgage, and you should put the amount, the value of that loan at the end of the year in there. Okay. And then other debt that you may have, if you have a loan through another private banking institution or whatever that you owe somebody other funds, that would be in line 27. Okay. Lines 29 or 28 through 36 are actually based on your apportionments and monies that you run through the conference. You don't have to enter these in at all. We know what you send in. So with the exception of your health insurance information and the pension benefits, those aren't in this section, but like your all the monies that you did give to benevolent causes that flow through the conference would be in this section, and we will put those in for you. We generally wait to upload those until we're sure that the books have been closed for the year. So somewhere toward the end of January, that information will be uploaded. I do have it so you can see it, but you wouldn't be able to change it. Okay. If you have benevolences that you have given to causes outside of the United Methodist Church, or you've sent them directly, they're going to be in lines 37 or line 38, okay? Because you've given them directly to another cause without them coming to us. We don't even know what those are, okay? All righty. In line 39 through 40 are clergy benefits that are not salary. Line 41 through 45 are housing and ARPs and other cash allowances and salaries for other people. So they're not for your pastor. So if you have salaries for daycare workers, custodians, all those folks will be in there. Okay. 46 and 47 are operating expenses and program expenses. Okay. And 48 is interest and principal payments you've made throughout the year. And 49 are capital expenses. So if you have to redo your parking lot or put a new roof on, you have a large capital expense, it needs to go in line 49. So how does this translate? We've talked a little bit about, the line numbers, and I'm sure some of you know that we actually use some of this data for our apportionments. The ones in red up here, the housing, ARPs, cash allowances, salaries, program, and operating expenses are the only information that we use for your shares of ministry calculation, okay? That's why it's very important, if you have a capital expenditure, please put it on the proper line, because otherwise it gets included in the calculation of your shares of ministry. And we're going to look at that a little bit later on. Okay? So it's very important that you make sure it's right in those boxes that you're going to add this information. Okay? Any questions on the table 2? Okay. We're going to go to table 2B, and this is the new table. Okay? This information I need for two purposes. One, I need it for our annual workers' compensation audit, because we are part of a group of 5 United Methodist entities that come together for our workers' compensation. We're self-funded, and as such, we have to provide an accounting of certain information to the group so that they know how to charge us. So part of that is information that's on here. Well, actually, it's all on here. And the other thing that I use this for is those churches that have a daycare that is fully owned and operated by the church are able to take a reduction of their expenses before I calculate the shares of ministry. Used to be, I used to send out a sheet that said, how much did you pay for this, this, and this? And you had to turn that back in. Well, it's sort of silly, you're already in that mode of putting that information in, so let's just gather it at the same time. So the information that we're asking for is line 45A, is the total of all the daycare wages that were paid for anybody who worked in the daycare. Okay. 45B, and actually all the wage information goes to the workers' compensation calculation. So that's why I need it broken down in certain ways, because each group we get charged a different rate for, because their jobs may be more or less risky than another job. Okay. So 45B is custodial staff who work in an active cemetery. Now, an active cemetery doesn't mean that it has spirits in it. It means that it's open, still open for interment, okay? So if that cemetery still has plots available and they are still actively burying people there, I need to know the wages of anybody who works in that, would be out and among that area. Because you can imagine that their rate for workers' compensation might be a little bit different than somebody who sits in the office all day, okay? The last category is for all other compensation. Now, that is without your pastor. I will gather the pastor information from the other lines, but the total of all other compensation would be, do you pay an organist? Do you pay an administrative assistant? Do you pay maybe a youth pastor? Do you pay a person who leads your worship? Those types of salaries go in this other category, okay? Like I said, we get charged different rates for all of those, so that's why I need them all broken down, okay? 46A is any program expenses, now these relate just to the daycare, that you would have paid just for their programming. Should you have them as part of your budget, even if you don't, you should include all their expenses on your statistical report, and then we're backing them back out again. Okay. The operating expenses might be that if you had like your utilities, if you have a daycare where you have to keep the water or the heat on more than you might if your building was empty during the week. So you can charge a portion of those utilities back to the daycare on this form. Okay, so you'll actually get a credit for that. Then in line 52, if you had somebody who is in one of the other categories, not a daycare staff, but say the custodian, maybe the custodian works more because you have a daycare and you want to attribute some of that salary to the daycare, you can do that on line 52, okay? And then it will come down and total the rest of these for you. But that way it'll provide all the information. Remember, I used to send out that form and it would be due by the end of March. Well, now it's gonna all be together and done all at the same time. Okay. Any questions on that? Yes, ma'am.
Is a preschool considered the same as
Preschool and daycare, and actually even if, and I don't know that any church here has it, but if you have an elder care also, yeah. It might be the next business for someone to go into, is elder care. So, yes ma'am.
On 45C, what I'm understanding there, wages for other staff not already accounted for, that's custodian on the administrative assistant.
Yep, if they are, hold on a second, let me look at that. 45C, yes, it would definitely be for like your, if it was a custodian that wasn't, you didn't have an active cemetery, it's just a regular custodian. And then line 52 would be is if that custodian's part of that wages or those employees were attributable to the daycare, you could break it out there. Pardon me?
These are only people on 45C that relate to daycare? No.
45, all the 45s are just all your employees except for your pastors. So you're going to break all your employees down there. Additionally, down in the bottom, if you have some of these employees that relate to the daycare in some way, you can designate some of their salaries to be pulled out them for the statistical report, so that when we do the shares of ministry calculation, we can decrease your expenses in that area. Okay. all of the daycare staff would already be there. We already know what that is, but we don't know how much of these employees' time might be attributable to the daycare as well.
Our church has a custodial company,
Uh-huh.
so that's where you would be recorded down.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Actually not. You said a custodial company?
Under operating expenses.
Yeah, they would be under operating expenses, but you could designate part of the operating expenses on line 47A then, if part of it was attributable to the daycare. But this is for salary information only, and it's because I need it for, we only cover our actual employees for workers' compensation. Your custodial company would be covered, they would have their own policy.
So we wouldn't record that anywhere?
You record it under operating expenses, and that was back here on operating expenses is on line 47. Okay, so you'll just record it as a part of line 47. Yep, if you had an outside service. Yeah. Sorry, I misunderstood what you said. My mouth started going before I. Thank you. You're welcome. Okay. Any more questions on report 2 or table 2?
When you say other than hospital staff, we mean other than appointed pastors, right? Because we have pastors on staff.
Correct.
And anyone extra staff members.
Yes. Yeah. Her question was, other than, when I said other than your clergy, and I mean other than your appointed clergy. So if you have other clergy that's not appointed, they would go in on that section then as well as other staff. Okay. All right, the last table is the actual revenue section. In this section, we're asking for information about your funds coming in. How is your church running? One of the reasons that this is sort of important is if we see that your church is not bringing in much revenue, yet you have significant expenses, how are you paying for that? Are you pulling that from maybe a benevolent grant that you have? Or maybe your church is having some issues and it hasn't been discovered yet. So those are things that we sort of, while we don't look at them individually, sometimes that can point to an issue with the church later on. It is not included in your shares of ministry in any way, shape, or form at this point. We've looked at that and have not found a good way to do that, so we're not going to do that right now. So don't be worried that we're going to tax you, if you will, on your income, because that's not what's happening with this. This is more going to the general church than anything. And by the way, our shares of ministry as a conference toward the general church, it comes from this information as well. Okay. So those are the lines that are required, other than me adding the second or that table 2B, and then just some line renumbering. I think most of it's fairly the same. There's a couple things that are different, but not too terribly different this year. Not like we experienced 4 years ago when we did it all again. It changed dramatically. So yes, Charlie.
A question came from one of my churches. For those churches who invest in the Stewardship Foundation and have a net loss, is there a way to document that?
Way to document it. I don't know if on this report there is or not, but let me look. There should be a place,
For loss in investments, I guess.
right. I don't know that there is at this point, Charlie. That probably is a good, I mean, you could put it under 52D as a negative. That is amount received from interest and dividends and or transferred from liquid assets. I would say that that might be the best place to put that if they had a loss. Okay. All right, any questions on statistical reporting itself? Okay, we're going to talk about, yes ma'am.
What's this alignment number and this GCNN number?
Okay, the alignment number is simply your church number to the conference. Okay, so the number that I told you at the beginning, that's part of your username, that's that. Your GCNO number is actually your number that your church is known to the general church. And that's assigned, you have another number that's assigned. And they will be filled in automatically for you on here. Yeah, that's already there. Yeah, they have a set of numbers and then we have a set of numbers. So, okay.
We're just a number, huh?
Yep, you're just a number. Not really. So.
Just a number, but I know your name.
That's right. That's right. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about the shares of ministry calculation here. Okay, so how do we use this information that you've worked so hard to make sure is in there correctly? How do we use this when we do shares of ministry? Oops, sorry, we'll go back. So we talked about that it's lines 41 to 47 is going to be our starting point. And we're going to reduce that by the daycare expenses. So that information that you put on table 2B, I'm going to use then and I'm going to reduce you all accordingly, your expenses if you have a daycare or preschool. Then what we're going to do is and don't worry, we're going to show an example of this. We're going to take your total, your net total there, and we're going to compare yours to every other church. And then we're going to take that percentage, what percentage you are of the total, and we're going to multiply it by the shares of ministry or the conference budget. And that's how we're going to spread it. Okay? So let's look at how that'll work. So I did this in your sheet will be one sheet that shows this. I sort of blew it up a little bit so you can see. Okay, so here I had an example for you. In this illustration, our conference budget is $120,000. Okay, we had only 10 churches in our conference. Okay, and you can see in the first column there, you can see that from table 2, I have the following information. I have all of their expenses all added up from lines 41 to 47 for each church. Okay? Now in the next column over, you're going to see that we have, 4 churches there that have daycare or preschools. Okay? And that number is going to be subtracted from the amount of the expenses that were reported originally for that church. Okay? So whereas we started with $610,000 as the total, we had, for all the churches, we have $41,000 in daycare expenses. So we subtract them out, we have $569,000 left. Okay? And you can see how each one of those churches in that third column, did I click the thing? Sorry. You can see there where the adjusted total is what was subtracted out. Okay? And then the next column shows the amount, what's each church's percentage of the $569,000. So if you took, for First UMC, they had $60,000 as their adjusted total, divided by the $569,000, they had 0.105 of the expense, of the total expense. Okay, and if you added all those percentages, it's going to come up to 1 because we're looking at what portion is each church of the total. Okay? On this slide, you can start, we see the adjusted total, and we're going to see where this shares of ministry was calculated. Okay, so we took that percentage and we multiplied it by the 120,000. Okay, so each church gets a portion of the 120,000. The next column is, what was that church's shares of ministry last year? Because we agreed as an annual conference that no church's shares of ministry can increase more than 20% or decrease more than 20% in any one year, okay? So you can see what the percentage change is in the columnar change, okay? And you'll see there's a couple that are outside those parameters. The final shares of ministry number is the way that I have to do it when I get to that point is I have to apply that upper limit first. I have to say anybody over 20%, yep, you're going to be capped at 20%, that's it. And then I start backing down to how much of a decrease can I allow. In this example, I could allow a 17% decrease. I couldn't allow the full 20 because we wouldn't meet the budget. But I could allow 17% decrease. So had there been somebody that the increase was 19% or 18%, then they would have been held to 17% of a decrease in this case. Okay? So that's how it's done. There's no magic in it. It's really a pretty straightforward calculation. I do not manipulate anybody's numbers, even when Charlie asked me to. I just don't do it. That being said, what happens if you get your shares of ministry in the next year and you say, oh my goodness, look at this information, this can't be right. And we look at because when I send this out, I send your full calculation to you. And I show you what you entered on those corresponding lines on the statistical reports. What if something's wrong? What do you think you need to do? Call me, we'll fix it. It's as simple as that. If you can provide me with the proper information, we're going to fix it, okay? I will never fix it, however, if you should have paid more. So just don't expect that I'm going to say, oh yeah, you calculated incorrectly, you have to pay twice as much now. It's just not going to happen. But if you are overpaying, I certainly will fix that, okay? So please be aware that you can always call me, we can always talk through it. If there's an issue with something, we will get it corrected. Okay. Any questions on the shares of ministry calculation? Oh, yes, sir.
So and the information that you take from the statistical reports to figure out calculations, program expenses and operating expenses get equal weight.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, nothing is weighted any differently. The only thing that we change is that, well, that's not even true. Well, that is. But there's one other thing that we do take into consideration. If you are a part of a church merger, if you had a merger of your churches within that year, you actually, either in the year of the merger or the subsequent year, you get a 20% discount in your shares of ministry. 1 year only. But that does happen. We are also working on what are we going to do for new church plants and satellites. That's something that's coming along in the next few years, but it's not part of the calculation yet. So other than that, I do not do any manipulation of the data. I don't weight anything. It's all equal. Okay. All right. Anything else? Okay. So once you get your shares of ministry calculated, and by the way, those shares of ministry are usually out to each church. Like I say, I send out, they come out in two different ways. One is they are posted on our website. You can use your church number to go in and get that. And number two is we do send them out by paper to every church. And they are always delivered to the pastor. By the way, shares of ministry information goes to the pastor as per Book of Discipline. So even though sometimes it makes more sense, because some pastors don't pass things along, to send it to the treasurer, we cannot. It has to go to the pastor. And it has to go to the pastor's mailing address. The mailing address is their home, that's where it's going. Okay? You are always welcome, though, to call me, and we'll get you a copy. But likewise, especially with this calculation and with your remittance report, you can see that online if you just know your church number. Okay? So the information goes out to the pastors usually in August or so, maybe September, depending on timing of meetings and things like that. But you should have all received that by now for next year. And everybody's shaking their head, but I had a couple calls this week that they didn't know what it was yet, so not really sure where the problem was in that. But like I said, you can see that online as well. And by the way, if you contact me and we should happen to change your shares of ministry, you'll get a revised sheet, and the information will also be revised on the system on the conference website as well. Okay. So once you get that information, how do you get your payments into us? Well, there's a treasurer's remittance report, and that is included in your packet as well. Making a mess, Kelly, sorry. And that, actually, this is the 2018 Shares of Ministry remittance report. Already we have, Ann has gotten that together. You can send your payments in. We prefer, if you can, to do it monthly. Remember that, the expenses in the conference office don't all happen in December. And, most people are pretty good, churches are pretty good at sending them out, on a periodic basis. On this report, please remember to make sure it adds correctly and it ties to the check you're sending. We've had a lot that just send a check and that's it. We've had a lot that they don't add. There's all sorts of variations on that. We also have people, I'd encourage you to always use the correct year. We still receive, do you remember those old forms that were duplicate that you would write and it would go through to the next copy? Yeah, we still get those. Yeah, they're really old. They were back from when I was a local treasurer. So yeah, it becomes an issue. And I can tell you that if your payment comes in that way, Ann's going to take it and put it in a pile. Ann Watts is who deals with this, and she's going to save it until she has processed all the other ones that are easier to do. That's just human nature. It will get applied, but it's just not going to get applied as timely as it might otherwise. Okay. Like I said, your church statement for the month is available online, usually after about the 5th of the month. That may even be late. Again, you just need your church number to go in and get that. I'd encourage you to look at that every month. Always be aware of overpayments. We have a number of overpayments right this year, and Ann's sending out statements again right now. Those overpayments she's highlighting, if you get one, please let her know if you want it to be applied to something else this year. Otherwise, it's going to be applied to the same category that it was remitted in, and it's going to be applied for next year. Okay, so we're just going to move it from one year to the next. Okay, so if you want that money applied to something else, you got to tell her. And it has to be by the end of this month that you tell her that. All right? Any other things on the remittance, Kelly?
Their church number and a contact.
Yes. Make sure you have your church number on here, and it is your church number. She had a case a couple weeks ago. As you can imagine, she's doing this for 860 churches. And as she goes through, she's not checking your church number to make sure it's your church number. And we had a situation where 2 other churches were using another church's number. One was way overpaid and the other 2 weren't at all. So please make sure that that's your church number.
Also, down at the bottom, your contact information. Sometimes people, write their names in here and their penmanship is a little bit, it's like my husband's. So anyway.
It's not readable. Put it clearly, please. Write down who they can contact or Ann can contact to get information quickly. Okay? So if you do that, that would make her job easier and she will forever thank you. Okay? Alrighty. We do mail statements, usually quarterly. We're still mailing them because there are some places that do not have internet access. So we still mail them, which I think at some point we're going to have to phase out, or at least cut back on. But we also, like I said, they're available online. And then the last 3 months of the year, we mail them every month so that everybody gets a good idea of where they are. Okay. If you have a situation where you use your bank's online banking to produce a check to send to the conference, that is fine. Because you can actually go on the conference website and print out your remittance or fax it or just send it by email or whatever to Ann, and then she'll match it up when it comes in. She knows those computerized checks, that's fine to do. We're hoping within the next year to be able to provide a different payment vehicle that you'll be able to pay directly. Regardless, you won't have to send a physical check in. That we're working on right now. So I'm hoping that that will be in the not too distant future. Okay. Do you have any questions for me on shares of ministry or remittance or statistical reports, any of those items? Yes, ma'am.
On 28B, amount apportioned to the local church by district.
We don't have any. We don't do district apportionments.
Not yet.
Some conferences actually do conference apportionments and district apportionments, and we do not. So that will be 0 for everybody here because we don't do that at all. Okay. No superintendent's T fund, sorry. That's equitable compensation, or it could be a small membership grant. That is actually, you show that income on line 54A, but your salary, when you put that in on your expenses, should be the full amount of the salary. Even though they're not really paying all of your salary, it should be the full amount there, and then reflect that there's an equitable comp grant coming in on 54A. It's on the last page, down near the bottom. Did you find it? Okay, you're welcome. Okay, well, if you don't have any other questions for me, Kelly's going to talk to you about clergy benefits, and then you'll be out of here. So, thank you.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you for coming. My name is Kelly Cox. I'm the Conference Benefits Officer, and I'm going to talk to you briefly about pension and health insurance, how we calculate that, the billings, etc. So the first item on your list here is worksheet 6. Now, most of you have gone through the annual process of your charge conference and filling out worksheet 6. So in your packet, I've actually supplied you with that. That's really the basis for your pension and health insurance for the church. Whatever the church is responsible for, it is on worksheet 6. There's 2 pieces to the pension on there, as you know, a defined benefit and a defined contribution, and also the church's portion of the health insurance. The church's portion of the health insurance will not increase from 17 to 18. It'll still be $14,000 for the year. Additionally, the pastor, this is only if your pastor is a full-time appointment, is health insurance an issue. So for your health insurance for the pastor's portion, those rates that the pastor contributes have not changed from 17 to 18 as well. That table is behind worksheet 6 in your packet. I've listed the rate. It's dependent upon the plan that they chose during open enrollment and the tier of that plan. Now, if you're the treasurer or finance team person that works on payroll and also remitting checks for the pension and health, what you need to do is make sure that the pastor lets you know what health insurance plan they chose. Most of them haven't switched plans. We're a pretty stable group. We don't go outside of the box, so they don't change it much, but sometimes they do. And that will change the rate that they must have withheld from their pay and therefore remitted. So be in contact with your pastor because open enrollment is done, so they've made their choices. And that with health insurance is flex spending. They may have chosen a flex spending amount for next year. You want to know what that is, as well as they could have chosen dependent care. Not a lot of our folks do that, but some do. And those amounts are all cared for the same way as the health insurance via a deduction from payroll. And if the pastor doesn't remember what they chose, call me. I have everybody's open enrollment information from this year, so thank you. In your packet after the health insurance rates is contribution election. That form is the form we refer to as UMPIP, or the United Methodist Personal Investment Plan. That is where the pastor can elect to remit money from their payroll, have it withheld and then remitted to go toward their pension. They can choose to do that, and they can choose to do it at any time during the year. Doesn't have to be just in January, or if their appointment changes in July. If they decide in August they want to add to that or take away from, they need to complete that form. And it's a very simple form. You can see it does not need to get signed by anybody in the church. It just needs to be signed by the pastor. The pastor's making a change. They will then give a copy to their treasurer so that their treasurer knows what to withhold. And then they will send a copy to me because I have to affect the pension system itself, and then I also change the billing.
So
Okay?
it's sent to you, not to...
Do not send it to Westpath, because what's going to happen is Westpath will change it, but then I have no idea that there's a change. So that's why if you see on that form at the very bottom on the second page, I've whited that out. I don't even give you the address to send it to. Okay? And that's really probably the number one, it's not a problem, but it becomes a problem that I have, is if somebody circumvents me, then it takes me a month or two to catch up to that change. So it's just helpful to know about that. So all of these numbers, pension, health insurance, we bill through a billing company. You get a bill once a month from a company, and it says remit it to SUSUMC. And that billing company is actually located in Pittsburgh. And what I do is I feed them all the information to come up with that bill. And like Andrea had said earlier, we do it based on the information that we have. It is as accurate as we have it. That doesn't mean that sometimes it's wrong. It could be. So if you have a question when you get that invoice, please call me. Please do not wait till December and say, well, that invoice has been wrong all year. We can fix it, but boy, it sure is a lot easier to fix in February than it is in December, okay? And if there is a discrepancy, that means there's a lack of information somewhere. Either I don't have it or the treasurer doesn't have it. So it just takes a few moments usually to work that out. So I would just really encourage you to look at the bill, because again, your worksheet 6 will match 3 parts of that bill. And then if your pastor has the other parts, health insurance, flex spending, or UMPIP, you should have documents for that, and that should be withheld from the payroll and easily matched up to that invoice. Okay? I know it's a lot of stuff. Does any, yes?
We have a staff person who is hoping to become a local pastor in July. So would they then be put on conference health insurance?
They will be full-time,
Yeah.
and they'll be a local pastor? Then yes.
Okay.
And we'll make those changes whenever that appointment happens. A lot of appointments happen July 1, but we have appointment changes all throughout the year. So as soon as I'm notified of the change, if they're health insurance and pension eligible, I will contact that clergy person to have them fill out the proper documents to get them enrolled. Any other questions?
I have a question just about in terms of, I know one of the tax benefits is, paying up, having a tax deferred until you retire to get your pension. But I know that there's a court case that took place concerning about clergy and housing allowance. And I know normally our pension, what we receive as pastors, is able to be applied towards housing allowance. Have you heard any more about that? Because I would think that could make a difference in terms of how you might want to
Sure.
select in terms of what you have taken out.
Sure. Yes, we are aware of what's going on, but nothing has been, I think it's in some kind of a court circuit somewhere. But WestPath Benefits and Investments has people on that, and they will keep us apprised of that information. So when we get information on that, we will surely disseminate that to the clergy.
One other thing with that is that I understand that there's a benefit for you to take it as pre-tax now, and then because being clergy, you would have the tax advantage of the housing allowance.
Right.
Well, the other piece is this: you probably are going to make less in retirement anyway.
Possibly in a
Yes.
tax bracket, correct?
So you could be in a lower tax bracket. So it's not just that's that you got to consider. But yes, that is something that WestPath and Kelly and I are watching, and we'll communicate that as soon as we hear more about that. So.
Any other questions on pension or health insurance? If not, that's all that I have. We're so thankful that you came out to listen to us, and like I said, and Andrea said, this is being recorded, so if you have folks at your church that want to hear about this, they can go on our website and do so. Thank you.